Good morning. It's around 9:45 a.m. today, so you'll notice it's not the middle of the night. I'm actually up in the morning because I missed my targeted upload date for yesterday, but I would still like to get my video in for this week. So, even though I've got a busy day ahead of me, I am awake slightly earlier than I would have liked to be, so that I could do my morning stuff and then also have time to do this before getting ready. So, instead of doing the 4 elements video, which I want to do still, but maybe next week, because I'm still not completely prepared with what I have to say, and I had another idea that I wanted to do more pressingly, and that was how to read a birth chart. The basics of it, at least. So, basically, I want to talk about how the Ascendant, Descendant, Midheaven, and IC are calculated and their basic symbolic meanings, so that later I can hopefully, kind of build on it over time, and if anyone needs to know, the basics of how the birth chart works, I can refer them back to this. Okay, so let's start with the Ascendant. Okay, so hold on, this is what my hand's for. The Ascendant. Okay, so this is also known as the rising sign. This is the point where the sunrise is in the morning time, right? So the point that the Ascendant degree is at, it's the easternmost point. We all know, no matter where you are on Earth, the sun always rises in the east and sets in the west. So the east point over here, where the sun can be anywhere in your chart, but the place on the horizon where the sun rises from, whatever zodiac sign is rising here in the east at the moment you're born becomes your rising sign or your ascendant. And the basic meanings of the Ascendant, the keywords that I've chosen for it are begin, manifest, and self, because the Ascendant marks where the first house will begin in a chart. And so because it's the moment where you are becoming a real being, basically. And this applies to a person, but it also applies to a thing, because if you don't know, you can calculate charts for anything that has been created or born. So, for example, a lot of people will use the release date of a movie or a TV show and calculate a birth chart for that, because it's the time when the show became widely available in its intended format, for example. Or when an album releases at midnight, you can use that as the birth time for the album. And it represents that thing where the album was just an intangible concept at some point, which was then made, but at the moment that it is shared, it's considered to have been born. And in this same way, it's where all of the nebulous things of the 12th house, which is right up here in the sky, all of these unmanifest potential things become manifest. That's why I've seen the 12th house associated with pregnancy. Sorry, I'm stumbling over my words. Maybe because it's morning. I'm a little tired. Yes, the Ascendant deals with anything that is associated with the self of either a person or a property. And so this can include your body, your bodily health, because that's the primary thing that happens when a human being is born, is your body ceases to be in its formation stages and is instead more or less the fruit of a fully formed person. Your matter has become manifest in the physical world. You've taken your first breath. Breath is an important concept with the Ascendant. When you take that first breath, that is, I think, in some traditions, that's considered to be when the soul enters the body, is with your first breath. So that's a perspective to consider. Let's see, what else about the Ascendant? So it can represent your body, so your physical self, but it can also represent your personality and your behaviors. Especially like, so a lot of people say that the Ascendant is a mask, and I think people take the word mask in this context to mean something that is like false, or something that is a ruse, we could say. But I don't think that's an accurate description of the kind of mask that the Ascendant is. I recently saw a video from Rick Levine on the Astrology Hub where he was talking about how the Ascendant is like a shield. So, excuse me, the Ascendant is kind of like your front that you present to the world with. In a way, it is a mask, but in the archetypal sort of sense of a mask being a sort of your like outer shell, your persona that you use to interface with the world. It's your operating system, basically. It's when people look at you and they determine, you know, are you a Windows, are you a Mac, are you iOS, are you Android, kind of, are you Linux, you know? That sort of thing, I guess. So the Ascendant filters how you primarily and instinctively interact with the world, and also how the world primarily perceives you when they're face to face with you. For people who don't know you so well, that's a little different. That's going to be covered up here under the Midheaven, but we're not there yet. Let's see, is there anything else that the Ascendant signifies other than physical health, personality, I guess your behaviors? Oh, also your, just along with your physical body and your health, it represents your appearance. So, how you look. So different planets in the Ascendant will give different impacts upon the appearance of a person. The moon, the sun in the Ascendant can give a very radiant, prominent, or noticeable quality to the appearance. So for better or for worse, things about your appearance will either stand out or be very obvious to people. The moon in the Ascendant can be very so the moon is considered a very beautiful planet. So having the moon in the first can give something of a conventional beauty. This will be more of like a soft, kind of appearance, and it'll give you like a lot of roundness in the face, because, you know, the moon's vibe is very like round. And let's see, Mercury can also be considered kind of like a beautiful planet. But Mercury might also give kind of like, you might be a fast talker or a slow talker, but either way, your talking is notable. The speed of your speech might be noticeable. The way that you decorate yourself might be noticeable if you've got a lot of Mercury influence. You might be someone who accessorizes a lot. Yeah, if you have Venus in the Ascendant in the first house, Venus also is one of those planets that classically gives beauty. You might have a very artistic nature around you, even if you're not like super conventionally attractive, although Venus can, if there's any planet that's associated with being conventionally beautiful, I would say it's Venus, because Venus is kind of consensus standards of societal beauty. In some ways, very like crafted, form-based beauty, but Venus can also give a very natural beauty depending on which face of Venus you have. You know, Venus has this duality to it, with its divisions into morning star and evening star Venus. And I believe evening star is a little bit more that like natural beauty, and morning star is a little bit more of that kind of constructed model type beauty, but it depends. At the very least, I know Taurus is associated with that more natural side of Venus's beauty, and Libra with the more kind of like more heavily curated kind of beauty, we could say. Like Taurus is a garden and Libra is an art museum, kind of, like, let's say. That's the vibe of different kinds of Venus influence. But, you know, if it's the planet Venus itself, it can include either or both of those aesthetics to the appearance. If you have Mars in the Ascendant, you might appear very forward, very maybe kind of like bold in some way. This can be like in a positive way depending on how you're perceived by other people. So you can seem like someone who takes initiative and is like has like leadership oriented qualities. The Sun can also give that sort of like leadership vibe, but the Sun and Mars can also both make you appear hot because they're both planets that are associated with heat. So you could be a real hottie if you've got Mars in the first or the Sun in the first. Let's see, after that, Jupiter. Jupiter in the first can make you very jovial. It can give you a vibe where you're really like, it can also give, I guess, sort of like a roundness, like the moon can. But the moon's aura is kind of like a peaceful and like sort of like chill kind of vibe, whereas Jupiter is like jovial, you know, like you've got some sort of like cheerfulness to your vibe. You might come off as very like concerned with like morals or ethics or values. So you could seem like a very principled kind of person. You can also seem a little spontaneous in your nature, for better or for worse. Let's see. And then Saturn in the Ascendant, it can make you appear very, I guess you can appear very taciturn, very kind of like have a stern kind of vibe. This is the sort of thing where you might give off like strong like librarian vibes, for example, like the stereotype of a librarian where you seem very like strict. Saturn can give that. Saturn can also make you appear very like dedicated, very reliable, or it can just make you seem slow, like someone who just like talks slow, walks slow, and generally is like working on a slower pace than the people around them. Okay. Let me also do the outers, I guess. Uranus in the first house can give you an appearance that is, to use the classic Uranus keyword, eccentric. So Uranus can be an eccentric sort of appearance in terms of like maybe something about your physical body is different from the norm of the people around you. Maybe you choose to curate your aesthetic in a way that is countercultural. So this would be kind of like, you know, like punk is generally by sentiment a very countercultural sort of phenomenon. So if you style yourself in a very punk way and you don't live in an area where there's many other punk people, you will have that sort of like Uranus in the first vibe to you, you know? You don't have to be punk. You can be any sort of aesthetic that is countercultural to the norm where you are. So this could have been like, you know, if you were somewhere like, for example, where women were expected to kind of like wear skirts a lot, but you decided that you were a woman and you were going to wear pants. that could be an example of like a Uranus vibe. A Uranus in the first house vibe. Okay, Neptune in the first house. You might have a very dreamy, ethereal vibe to you. You might appear a little bit enchanting at first, or you might just appear a little bit elusive to the people who meet you. Like you're kind of like hard to pin down. Neptune can give an otherworldly sort of feeling to you. And it has, I think it can have a little bit of glamour to it sometimes, where you can seem like, because like Neptune, sorry, is associated like with movie stars and photography and those sort of like more modern visual arts that have to do with like cinematography and media that's in that sort of photographic vibe. So you could have that sort of like, you might photograph really well if you have Neptune on the Ascendant, for example, or your appearance might look different in every photo you take. So that's Neptune in the first vibes. And then Pluto in the first vibes. You might appear very intense to other people. There might be something about you that feels very magnetic, that kind of draws people in, but on the other hand, you might give off an impression of intensity to other people. People might sense that you have a great depth to you, kind of, and it might be the sort of thing where you attract people who are trying to have really deep conversations with you because they sense that that's the sort of thing that you are sort of open to. Yeah, you might seem like someone who has like a very like laser focus and intensity, a determination, a never back down sort of vibe, like a sort of like you seem like you have a force to you. Okay, so that's all of the 10 main planets in the first house, and now we can finally move to, so the sunrise point in the east then proceeds, the sun goes up, 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 up in the sky until it reaches the top of the sky around midday or high noon. And this is where we find the midheaven, also known as the MC, which stands for medium coli in, I think, Latin, and it means middle sky. So literally when the sun is up at the top, at the middle of the sky. And so again, the sun could be anywhere in the chart, but the midheaven is just the point of the sky when you're born that would be considered the highest, and any planet can be there. So the midheaven, I guess there's also, so the process here is that the sun rises in the east, and when it gets to the midheaven, it's like the hottest point of the day, and it's also the most visible part of the day. So you're in the middle of the sky, you're out in the open, and things are unhideable unless there's clouds, but like that's the stuff about you that is going to be apparent even to people who don't know you. So the words I've chosen here are sky, achieve, and become. And another important word I would say here is reputation. And so like that goes together with kind of the midheaven being like the highest point of the sky, which is like the most visible part of you that is kind of like undeniable even from a distance. It's the reputation that precedes you even before people meet you. It's what you're known as in wider society. It's your public persona, as opposed to the IC, which we'll see later is the private persona. But yeah, the midheaven is where you are trying to achieve something. It's considered to be something that you are building towards in your lifetime. And it may be something that is kind of at odds with your ascendant in some ways, because like very often the ascendant and the midheaven can be square if you're in the sort of like middle, if you're in the more middle longitudes, not longitudes, if you're in the middle latitudes of Earth. So if you're like around the equator to like slightly like up in the more tropic areas of the world, like then especially they'll be square. It can be different when you get way up to the super north latitudes or super south latitudes, because the angle of the sun is more extreme, so you might end up with the midheaven being like in the 11th house, the 12th house even. But usually the midheaven is around the 10th house or maybe the 9th or 11th houses. But anyway, let's say that often the midheaven can be correlated with the 10th house, because in quadrant house systems where you're dividing the sky based on calculating the ascendant and the midheaven and then slicing the pie in between those two lines, it can be associated with that. So the midheaven is also, what is the other word I hear? Achieve and become. Okay, I kind of covered both of those. It's something you're working towards. It's the kind of persona you would like to achieve. It's the sort of the legacy that you'd like to build, the thing that you achieve in and of yourself, as opposed to the IC, which we'll see later, is sort of the legacy you inherit. Excuse me. The legacy you inherit and you leave for your descendants, or the people who are in your lineage, even if it's not your blood lineage, but like maybe in your line of work that you do in the world. And this doesn't have to be your career. The midheaven, people associated with career often, but it doesn't have to be your job that you do, because your job might not be what you're known for in society. You know, you might offer significant contributions in other ways than just your day job. This can be like you're known for being an activist, you're known for being like a community leader, you're known for being an organizer, you're known for being someone who volunteers, you're known for being someone who is artistic, even if it's not like the thing that puts food on the table and pays your bills. You might be known for your artistry. So in this way, the midheaven can align with your career if what you're known for is the career that you do, but it doesn't have to be your career, and that's a very important distinction to remember. Oh, also, planets that are up near the midheaven will give hints to the vocation that you'll be most known for in the world, most publicly apparent parts of yourself, and the things that impact what your reputation is perceived like. So you can take the sort of vibes from the ascendant planets and apply them to the midheaven, but they will indicate, instead of how people interact with you one-on-one or how you interface with the world, it'll be kind of like things about you that are very notable in your reputation, and yet there are things that you feel that you are striving towards and that you have not achieved at some point in your life, maybe when you're older, or you may not feel like you achieved them ever. You might feel like you're constantly striving for these qualities, even if other people already perceive them in you, which is the funny thing about the midheaven. It's a combination of where expectations meet reality, but in a very other-focused way. Because the public persona is, of course, another thing that's very shaped by the cultural context you live in. Okay? Alright, I think that's enough about the midheaven for now. Let's move on to the descendant. Okay, so after the sun reaches the highest point at noon, it goes and travels down, down, down until it reaches the very westmost part of the horizon, and that's the sunset point. It's exactly opposite the ascendant, so we refer to that as the descendant, because the sun is descending this way as opposed to it ascending this way. So the descendant is, well, I've never heard anyone else call it the setting sign before, but I'm sure someone has. But anyway, I think of it as kind of the setting sign. It is represented with the sunset, and it's the keywords that I've picked for it are end, disappear, and other. So because this is the point where the sun becomes manifest in the sky, it's opposite this sort of vibe of being born or becoming manifest, It's the opposite. It's where things go to end. It's where things go to disappear. So, oh, one thing I forgot to mention about the midheaven, because it's the middle of the sky changes a lot. You know, it's not, the sun's not going to be in the same place from hour to hour. The clouds aren't going to be in the same place from hour to hour. So the midheaven is associated with something that's very changeable, and in that way, like your reputation and your legacy are very kind of changeable. The work that you're known for is very changeable. And in this way, the descendant refers to your interactions with other people, and this too can be something that is very changeable depending on the planets you have there or the sign that's on there. Let me hold it like this maybe. Okay, so another thing about the descendant, what else would I like to cover? Okay, so yeah, it's your relationships to other people. And the most common thing you'll hear about the 7th house being related to marriage and business partners, but really the 7th house can indicate, the descendant marks the beginning of the 7th house in all quadrant house systems, and it's also where the 7th whole sign house follows. So whether you use quadrant house systems or whole sign house systems, the descendant will be in the 7th house, or it'll be the 7th house cusp. So it represents any one-on-one interactions that you have with other people. So in this way, yes, marriage, but also your closest friends, your besties, you know, the people who you hang out with one-on-one. It can also represent business partners because it is kind of like a very contractual kind of house in some ways. The 7th house is where agreements are made about like what the nature of the relationship is and what the exchange between you two is. It's where the agreements of the expected dynamic of things happens. With this reason, because it is others who oppose the self, some people put open enemies and exes also in the 7th house because they are someone that you have a very personal, direct sort of one-on-one relationship with, rivals, enemies, and yeah, open enemies, as opposed to like, if you have people that are just sort of like obstacles to you in your daily life, so like say like a difficult coworker or like a neighbor that's kind of bothering you, that would fall more in the 6th house, which is the house right below the 7th in the sky. And that's more of like that vibe. And if you want hidden enemies, which is like people who are detrimental to you but you don't even like know or realize it, you'll go opposite the 6th house to the 12th house, which is right above sunrise. And yeah, are there any other significations of the 7th house that I need to mention? I don't think so. I think that's good with the 7th house for now. Oh yeah, but I mean, it can represent kind of like your ideal partner, whether that's a platonic life partner, a life business partner, or a marital partner / spouse. The 7th house covers the qualities of the spouse. And yeah. So then we go, after the sun has set, it goes down, 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 and around midnight, it reaches the lowest point in the sky, the IC. When, as opposed to like when the sun's at noon and it's like straight up ahead, the IC point is at midnight, where it's all the way below your point on Earth, because time is local. And so the IC, then, it is, the IC, it stands for Imam Coli, and it means deepest sky, like I just said. It's associated with midnight, and the 3 keywords I chose for it are roots, origin, and foundation. So the IC is associated with the 4th house, and it is your lineage. It is the ancestry that you're born into. It is, well, I have to figure out a way to sit this up here. The IC is the origin of where you are. It's kind of like the basement of the chart, we could say, in some ways, where it's the thing that lurks under. In Hellenistic astrology, the fourth house, which is associated with the IC, was referred to as subterranean house, because they had different titles for the houses in Hellenistic astrology. The only one I can remember right now is the one for the IC, which is subterranean. And the thing about the subterranean house is that it's the underworld of your chart. So it's your most private, hidden self. This can be a place where creativity springs forth from, because creativity is best incubated in that sort of like private space where you can settle in, where you can rest, where you can recharge yourself and sort of compost the experiences you've had in order to derive creativity from. Now, this might not be quiet and peaceful for all people, depending on what your IC is by sign or by planetary placements, but in general, the IC is the place where you go to seek comfort, to seek family, to seek rest and sleep and privacy. The most important thing is that, the MC is the public self, the IC is the private self. So this might be a side of you that only people that you consider to be like family are able to perceive. You probably don't show this side of the world in a very public-facing way unless, for example, you share very private things. For example, the way an artist can pour a little bit of themselves into their art and sort of share their IC that way, or any sort of person who brings like a creativity and a personal touch of their experiences into whatever work they do in the world. Let's see, is there anything else I need to say about the IC? I think that's okay for now. Okay, other things I'd like to cover. So another distinction I'd like to cover is that, the ascendant-descendant line, that's where the horizon is. So if a planet is above the ascendant-descendant line in your chart, then that means that planet is in the sky above you. And if a planet is below the ascendant-descendant line, it means that the planet is not visible in the sky above you, but is instead under the earth from your point of view at that moment. So there's a distinction in Hellenistic astrology between people who are born with the sun above the ascendant-descendant line and people with the sun below the ascendant-descendant line. And this difference is classified as, do you have a day chart or a night chart? Very easily determined. If your sun is above the ascendant-descendant line, then you have a day chart. If the sun is below the ascendant-descendant line, you have a night chart. If you're born around sunrise or sunset, it can be a little bit ambiguous. And I think if you're born very close to then, the best thing to do is to determine, I guess, kind of like how far before or after sunrise or sunset were you born? How much light might have faded at that point? I'm not sure how you would figure that out unless you live in the place where you were born and you can check how sunrise and sunset look at that time of year. If you want to do it the complicated way. Or if you understand how day chart and night chart function in Hellenistic astrology, you could sort of analyze your subjective experiences with the planets to see which one feels more likely to you. Because part of the thing with Hellenistic is that if you have a day chart, then the planets that are on the day chart's team will be considered to give you more constructive, beneficial or helpful effects. So the day chart planets are the Sun, Jupiter, and Saturn. On the other hand, if you're born with the Sun below the Ascendant-Descendant line and you have a night chart, then the 3 planets on the night team are the ones that are considered to give you more positive, beneficial, helpful effects, and that will be the Moon, Venus, and Mars. Mercury can be on either team. It depends if it is rising before or after the Sun in the zodiac order. So you see here at the sunrise point, if Mercury would rise first before the Sun, it's considered to be a morning star Mercury or morning phase Mercury, and your Mercury would be with the day team. If Mercury rises after the Sun, so like first the Sun rises and then Mercury rises after it, you would have an evening star Mercury, and you would it would be with the night team. So I'll put some links in the description for like the difference between a morning star and an evening star Mercury, and also links for like reading more about what the day chart versus night chart distinction is. Yeah, so that's one important distinction between like the the upper hemisphere of the chart and the lower hemisphere of the chart. Now in humanistic / psychological astrology, like the kind that was like really popularized during like the 60s to 80s roughly, it's considered that having planets concentrated in certain halves or quadrants of the chart is important. And I think the 2 distinctions that they draw are between subjective and objective understandings, and then whether you're coming to an awareness of yourself or an awareness of other people. So the upper half of the chart is considered like your understanding of objective reality. So what does this mean? Objective reality being the kind of consensus reality that other people around you seem to agree on, the general worldview that your cultural context considers to be real, as opposed to the lower half of the chart being your subjective reality. This is entirely filtered through your own perception and your lens of the world, which may or may not align with your consensus reality. The eastern half of the chart towards the ascendant, so like east of the midheaven IC line, that will be the self-oriented part of the chart, because the ascendant is the self, and so planets in this half will have to do with either your subjective understanding of yourself and your internal experiences and desires, or your objective understanding of yourself, where you fit into society as a person, where your kind of like talents lie, and what kind of opportunities you perceive society as having for you. On the other hand, on the western side of the midheaven IC line, we have the half of the chart that deals with our understanding of others. So down here between the IC-DC quadrant, we have your subjective understanding of other people and your relationships with other people. So this is how you perceive that your interactions with other people go, whether they're more loving or more challenging. Sort of like, how well do you feel like you get along with other people? How is the process of making friends for you? How is the process of self-expression for you? And how well are you able to work with other people in your subjective perception? Whereas up here, between the descendant and the midheaven, this quadrant of the chart is your objective experience with other people. So sort of like, what are your tangible ties to other people and your tangible relationships with other people? Who are you beholden to? What agreements have you made with other people? What sort of like effect do your actions have on other people in your life and in the world around you? the sort of like objective sort of actions that are perceivable by other people, and the sort of the promises you uphold or don't uphold. That all falls within this quadrant of the chart. So that's something to consider also, is which parts of the chart planets are concentrated in, and that'll give you a vibe of where those planets will express themselves in your life. Okay, I will hold this up in case you want to take a screenshot of it. Well, what's a good way without... it's difficult. Okay, anyway, I think I'm going to call it there. I think I've given about all of the information that I wanted to give this time around. I will, of course, do more stuff about how to read a birth chart in the future, because there's so much more to cover, and I've only covered the basics of it. But I am happy with the basics that I've covered, and I hope you will take in some of the resources that I'm going to drop in the description below for videos and articles that can help you understand these distinctions a little bit more. So thank you so much if you watched this video, all or part of it. If you liked the video, please let me know by leaving a like, leaving a comment. Please share this video if you have another friend or acquaintance who would like to maybe learn how to read a birth chart. And yeah, if you have any questions or topic suggestions, you can leave that in the comments. And if you'd like to be notified when I post new videos, you can subscribe to the channel. You can also click the bell icon if you'd like to receive notifications on your phone about when my videos go up. But, you know, that's up to you. I think notifications are too much of an intrusion on the nervous system, so I don't like having too many notifications. But if you're the kind of person who does like it and you'd like to know when these videos come out, you can do that. Anyway, have a wonderful day or night wherever you are, and I will see you next time.